Today is going to be quite the busy day for me. I have, I have so much work I have to get done. Like, because I decided for my fantasy novels that I was doing that I'm going to expand it past 3 books. So it's no longer going to be a trilogy, it's now going to be a series. And being a series, that means I have to come up with so much more story. And it's not that I don't have it, it's that I'm fighting with kind of like the past me that only ever saw this as a 3-part tale. And now it's not a 3-part tale. So it's like, fighting with myself of everything involved in that. Like, I won't bog you down with all of the things that I'm currently doing in this video, but I have a lot of work that I'm doing. And I mean, it's not even just the fantasy series, it is also the superhero series that I'm working on. Like, there's a lot of work that has to go into that. And then that's not even all the other stories and things that I have on my plate. And I'm trying to get extremely organized so that I can get as much done each year as possible, because I know that these are going to be like multi-year kind of things. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done as a creative. And then, I look at stuff like this and, I talked about the Superman thing and Brian Michael Bendis's reasoning for deciding that now was the time for Superman to reveal his secret identity. And, it's sort of like the way I feel about this. Like, at this point, I'm just disappointed, but I keep thinking back to what Nerdrotic said in multiple of his videos at this point, because it's a problem that just keeps coming up, because it is, we're dealing with repurposers, and repurposers don't care about the actual story. They don't actually care about being good to the product. They don't care about doing anything but wanting to make their own mark and turning something to their own way. So, as you can see on this article, Deathstroke annihilates a batch of white supremacist zombies because, of course, he does. It's current year. And, we have been stuck with that phrase for so long at this point, the it's current year kind of trope. It's, it's not a valid excuse for lazy work. It's not a valid excuse to leave behind your creativity. I read The Deep by Tom Taylor, and it was a 6-part miniseries, but I remember really liking it. And I know that it got expanded to a show that was on Netflix for a long while. And I stopped watching it because it got a little bit too heavy-handed for me on the politics. But it was a fun and enjoyable family adventure. And you could tell it was something that he was really interested in. And I'm kind of tired at this point of like this destruction of established characters. And that's really kind of like, what this is. It's an assassination of established characters, because we're talking people who, treat their own creative properties with not necessarily kid gloves, but you could tell that there's a passion and a fire in there. And then they take a character that is established and they just want to do whatever they want to do with it because they don't even like the character, and then when customers complain and say, hey, this is not our character, the customers are called the bad people because, well, you're supposed to just take what we give you. And I'll be honest, and I will just say this up front. When you're working with someone else's characters, when you're working with somebody else's IP, you are the steward of that property. And because you are a steward of that property, you actually owe your customers something. You may not owe them everything, because it is a matter of not every criticism is valid criticism. Not every idea is a good idea. One of the things that I loved watching on Disney Plus was the first episode of the Imagineers, and it talked about the relationship between Walt and Roy Disney, and how essentially it was a matter of Walt had all these great ideas that he wanted to do, and Roy kind of helped him whittle it down to like the best ideas. So what they were doing, because Walt's thing was, well, let's just do it anyway and we'll find the money. And Roy's thing was like, well, okay, well, then at least let's do the best ideas kind of thing, because that's what you want when you're talking about something that is, now of course for them, it was working on Disneyland, and they were working on Disneyland with kind of already established IPs, which was his Mickey Mouse crew. You look at it now, and I saw some of the live streams of Clownfish TV when they were there at Disney World, and it didn't look as fun as my brain had made it out to be. And like one of the things that because I had watched on with the Imagineers, and then it went from being about this is the way that things were done to this is why things need to be relevant today. And that word relevant is like, every time relevant is used by non-creative people, because at this point, someone who is only interested in repurposing someone else's work and repurposing it for their purposes, which means agenda-based, and that's, because that is what we are getting nowadays. I keep up with a lot of this nerd culture stuff because, I keep up with the Star Trek things. I keep up with Doctor Who. I keep up with, a lot of these things. And, to see a lot of it go in that direction of repurposing, where people have no creativity and it's more about forcing their ideology on people. We are now kind of like at that place where everything is about that little word called relevance. And it goes with my feelings for diversity and inclusion. You mean the exact opposite. These stories are not going to age well. And I'm just going to keep saying it. Like, these stories are not going to age well because with these properties, like Brian Michael Bendis wants to be relevant. Tom Taylor wants to be relevant. Tom King wanted to be relevant. They wanted to take something that people loved and enjoyed, and they wanted to, put their stamp on it so that their name would always be remembered. And they didn't care if it came off good or bad. They want it to be relevant because it's not about these characters that they're using. Like, these characters are just characters that they are using. It's about themselves. It's about their own level of arrogance. It's about their need for attention, their need for accolades, their need to be told that they're brilliant. And it doesn't matter if many of them were talented decades ago or years ago, or if they work on their own IP that they, work well. It only matters what we see when it comes to other established people's IP. When you can't possibly get past pushing a narrative and pushing an agenda, you are not creative, and your story will fail because you're trying to be relevant. Like, I mean, there's not really much. I don't know that there's really much, because as far as this whole article is, I mean, it basically is what it says. For the DC, like the deceased little thing, that the event that DC did, which I had no interest in, just like the year of the villain, I just had no interest in, because it's the same thing that Marvel did, all these events after events after events after events, and I'm just not interested in all of these events. So essentially you're dealing with zombies, and so Deathstroke comes across a house full of racist zombies, and he proceeds to kill them. And there's no reason that these kind of zombies should even be in this story, except its current year with the current president, who they just insist on broad brushing with a term that is not even who he is. Like, I'm kind of tired at this point. And I'm pretty sure you can hear it, because it's like this video isn't even entertaining for me, because I'm just so sick and tired of it at this point. And it does go back to, I look at all the work that I'm putting in for the things that I'm doing, and part of me kind of feels like, why, when putting in so much work, like when putting in so much work matters to me, because I want to put out the best product that I can put out. I want my work to be entertaining. I want my fantasy series, I want people to be able to read it and love it. I want the same thing with my superhero things. I want people to read it. I want them to love it. I want them, it's not even necessarily about being inspiring or anything like that. It's about being entertained. It's about being able to read them, be entertained in that moment. And, maybe if you really enjoy it, pick it up again later and reread it. Like, that's the kind of work and effort that I put into the things that I'm doing, because I want people to be able to love what they have in their hands. And, it is extremely aggravating to see that as much effort as I put into what I'm doing, because I look at it, if I was allowed to, because I think to myself, if I was allowed to write for Superman, what would I do? And I know what I would do. I would go back and I would read as much Superman as I could. I have the first volume of the Golden Age of Superman, and I was reading through that. I have like a ton of Superman comics from the 80s and 90s. I have the whole Rebirth. I don't have the New 52, and I probably would cut out that New 52 Superman, because, well, at this point he's dead, and the only Superman that is my Superman is, classic Superman. So, but if I was going to do a spin that kind of melded those two together, then I would go back and I would read the New 52 Superman, because it's about the stories. It's about getting to know Superman as he is. It's about getting to know his villains, getting to know Lex Luthor, getting to know, getting to know, like, Lex Luthor is probably my favorite Superman villain, so I don't really give credence to anybody else. I think, like, the relationship that the two of them had is just masterful, because I hated him so much. But, even like the Eradicator, and, like bringing back some of those classics, and just like finding, new ways of just reintroducing it, and just having those classic Superman being Superman kind of stories. Like, that's what I would do. Why? Because Superman is an established property. We have 80 years of knowing who he is. And the expectation would be to give fans a Superman that they could be proud to want to go to the comic book shop and pick up and purchase and want to read. Because that's the kind of passion, that's the kind of passion a comic book creator, especially for an established property, that's the kind of passion a person should have. And this trend of just giving it to lazy people who aren't even passionate about it and are just like hiding behind their arrogance, it does need to end. It just, like, I don't even, I can't even. And I don't even, oh, yeah, it bothers me. As a creative, it bothers me. But I guess to a degree, this is kind of like the part 2 of, worldview influenced writing versus, agenda, because it does kind of go back to that. Like, people who want to do agenda in their writing, they tend to want relevance. They tend to want people to know their name immediately, and they don't tend to think long-term future. Like, Brian Michael Bendis is not thinking about the future of Superman. He's not thinking about the future of comics. He's thinking about himself just today and what he wants currently. Same thing with Tom King. You're not thinking about the future of these characters. You're not thinking about the future of comics or these properties. You're just thinking about yourself, what you want to accomplish, the agenda you want to push, and what you yourself are trying to say, because you think that current year relevance is somehow never going to end. And that was the arrogance of what happened in the 2016 election, where leftists believed that because President Obama was president for 8 years, they thought that they would never ever lose again because they were able to just do whatever they wanted to do. And then they found out different. And I know that this is part of a lot of the fight that's going on currently, is because they are finding out different. They're finding out that, people are starting to wake up and are starting to get tired of this attitude of, you all get to do what you want to do, and you get to use our properties that we love to do it. You get to, you think that you can just destroy what we love, destroy what we, what we use for escape, because you want current year relevance. I still say all the time, I don't know how much longer that this is going to last. Certainly I would hope that this year would be, the time where we can really see, really see, more than just the stirrings of that kind of pendulum swinging the other way, where we can actually begin, pressing forward and actually, having the establishment of the Indiegogos are kind of a part 1 of it, but the Ricky Gervais thing, the Dave Chappelle, the kind of hitting back at the arrogance of these people. You're starting, we are starting to see those kind of stirrings. And, I'm listening to people, regular people in regular life, and, they're beginning to notice things. And that's all such a good thing. But, whereas, people who are invested in seeing the change, invested in helping to create the change, what kind of role, are we going to play, kind of thing. I can't help but think as a creator, because that is what I am. So I know that in the work that I do, it's not necessarily about trying to be relevant, because I hate the idea of relevance. I would hate for my book, to come out and me make a book about something, and then 2 years later it doesn't even matter. That's not even the kind of writing that I would ever want to do, because I do like timeless work. and so how do we get back to that? Like, how do we get creators to understand that kind of working, that kind of timelessness, that leaving behind this idea of being relevant? Because to be honest, I can't even remember the writer who had Superman give up his US citizenship. I can't even remember his name. But I just remember that event. And I remember thinking that it was the stupidest thing ever. And I remember hating the fact that it's part of Superman's canon. Like that's literally it. Like, at the end of the day, no one is going to remember these specific writers' names because they're searching for relevance. They're not searching for timelessness. They're not searching for proper entertainment. They're not searching for that good story. They're searching for, how can I make myself feel better? How can I make people know who I am today? And like that never succeeds. I mean, and if it does, it's extremely rare occasions because you have to, like, you really, like, really have to think about that kind of thing. Like, if you're a creator, what kind of creator do you really want to be? Do you want one that has like relevant work and that's like pop culture fiction, where it really only is, relevant in that moment, and then when it's outside of that moment, it's just cheesy and people will mostly not read it because it's cheesy? Or do you want something like a Lord of the Rings or a Chronicles of Narnia, or something that people can pick up, Frankenstein, like true classics that people can pick up and they can read? And even if it's a matter of, it's like a flashback in time, but the story itself is so incredibly entertaining that the story itself is classic and timeless, because that should always be what you creators are striving for, that kind of timeless classic storytelling that entertains people, that gets them coming back, that makes them excited for for something new, kind of thing. So that's kind of like my thought process today. And it is a little bit inspired by the fact that I have a lot of work to do myself. So I'm gonna go and get my work done, or some work done. Anyway, if you like this, click the like button, click the subscribe button, do the bell stuff for notifications, share this, do all of that. Don't take this Deathstroke thing seriously, because I certainly don't. But I will see you on the next video. Bye.